I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Boulder Valley Board of Education for Tuesday, October 24th, 2017. Laura, could you please call the roll?
Belval. Here. Benford. Here. Fuqua.
Here.
Garcia. Gebhardt. Here. Marquis. Here. Myers.
Here. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to remind everybody that the mission of the Boulder Valley School District is to create challenging, meaningful, and engaging learning opportunities so that all children thrive and are prepared for successful, civically engaged lives. My sincere apologies, folks, for starting late tonight. We had multiple meetings stack up, and I'm sorry we kept you waiting, but we're glad you're here. I'm glad those of you who are watching at home are also tuning in. We'll begin, as always, with the superintendent's report. Good evening, Dr. Stevenson.
Just a couple of things for tonight. First of all, thanks to an audit committee meeting week before last where Kathy Gebhardt and Tina Marquez were both in attendance, we are going to recreate the superintendent's budget committee. So we're going to restart the advisory committee, and as you might recall, the committee operated for several years during and following the budget cuts of 2010. That committee helped bring the community voice into our district-level financial decisions. So as before, we will be looking to include parent and resident voices from different regional areas of Boulder Valley School District. In fact, we have placed a form on the district website, and people can find that out on our website, and we would encourage those who are interested, particularly people with a financial background, to consider joining our task force. Additionally, we will be inviting representatives from our employee organizations, including, of course, BVEA, and from our partners, including our foundation, Impact on Education, our cities and towns, and the University of Colorado. The group will meet up to 6 times each year, starting in November and focusing on the budget season, which ends in May. We expect the committee to engage in discussions about the budgeting process and priorities. It will also likely offer feedback on fiscal and budget strategies, including capital investments, board options, and override opportunities. Again, we would encourage citizens who are interested in serving to fill out the application, and we would encourage our board members to send names to us if there are people you're particularly interested in our contacting so that they serve. We would also like you to know that we have sent out the Healthy Kids Colorado survey, which is an event that Boulder Valley schools participate in each year. And this year, the Healthy Kids Colorado survey will be held in Aspen Creek, Pre-K 8, Boulder High, Broomfield Heights, Broomfield High, Centaurus High School, Fairview, Louisville Middle School, Manhattan Middle School of Arts, Monarch High, Netherland Middle School High School, and Nevin Platte Middle School. So should you hear that children are being given a survey which probes teenage behaviors, which we may be able to support families in eliminating, we want you to know that those are out there. And that's my report for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stevenson. Any questions or comments for the superintendent based on her report? All right, hearing none, thank you again, and we'll move to the next item on our agenda, which is public hearing and public participation. The board recognizes the value of public comment on issues related to the operation of the schools. To ensure that our meeting is conducted in an orderly manner, we ask that persons who address the board confine your comments to matters that are germane to the business of the school district. Speakers on agenda items will be heard first, followed by those speaking to non-agenda items. Please limit your presentation to 2 minutes. If we go over the first hour, public comment will continue at the end of the meeting. Recognize that students often attend or view our meetings. Speakers' remarks, therefore, should be suitable for an audience that includes kindergarten through 12th grade students. The board president may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement that is unrelated to the business of the district or inappropriate for K-12 students. There is a lighting system on the podium. It starts at green when your 2 minutes begins, turns yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining, and turns red at the end. When the light turns red, please wrap up your comments so that the board can hear from the maximum number of speakers. We have one speaker tonight on an agenda item, and that is Margaret Tharp. Ms. Tharp, good evening. Please come up to the podium and welcome.
evening. My name is Margaret Tharp. I'm a second-year law student at the University of Colorado. I just wanted to come speak today on the community Montessori expansion. I understand that the District Accountability Commission has recommended and I understand the monetary and budget issues as well as the demand issues that led to the recommendation of denial. But I hope that in the event that the denial does go through, that this does not mean the expansion shall be removed from the table permanently. A key point brought up in the recommendation memo is that given the lack of expansion proposals in recent years, there might be a lack of structure and guidance for expansion proposals that need to be addressed. I hope that with further investigation and guidance, the expansion will be reconsidered in the future, given the considerable community support for the idea. Especially once funding sources and grants can be more firmly established. As a student who attended a private Montessori school throughout elementary school, I saw the sacrifices my parents made to make sure I attended a school that would set me up for the most success possible, and can think of nothing better than making the same opportunities I had available as a public school. I credit attending a Montessori school for much of my success today, in not only an academic environment, but in everyday life, from interpersonal relationships to community engagement. A public school system that recognizes the need for varied learning environments gives more children a better chance at success than the one-size-fits-all method commonly employed in public schools. And I appreciate the work Boulder is doing in regards to expanding educational opportunities. Thank you for the chance to speak in front of you today, and I appreciate all your work.
Thank you very much. We'll move now to speakers on non-agenda items. First speaker is Margaret Ruskiewicz, who has an additional 2 minutes given to her from Joshua Romero. Or no, that's the reverse, sorry. Joshua Romero, who has 2 minutes given to him from Margaret Ruskiewicz. Mr. Romero, are you here? And you have 4 minutes. Okay, if you give it to Laura, our board secretary, she'll see that we all get it. And good evening and welcome.
Would it be valuable to hand these out to the cabinet as well?
Yeah, sure.
So hello, my name is Josh Romero. I'm a local chess master in Boulder County, and you may have seen me in the newspaper. I've made it my mission to make chess instruction and competition my full-time job. And so far, I've been able to accumulate 13 private students. I run the Boulder Public Library Chess Club. I help run the CU Chess Club, and I have 3 classes. So in my process of trying to make chess full-time, I've been trying to promote chess throughout the community through free methods like the library, but I also have to pursue revenue from private students as well as teaching after-school classes. I have a couple of parents that attend my camps that wanted to have me teach a class in their schools. So they spoke with their principals, and the principals were enthusiastic, and they told me, that sounds great, and please go through lifelong learning to hold a class. Now, lifelong learning is a subdivision of community schools, for those of you that don't know, and they're in charge of running most of the after-school programs. I met with one of their employees, and it was revealed to me that if you're a private individual without an LLC, they'll pay you $35 per class, and they take the remaining revenue. You have to keep in mind that a class fee is about $85 for a 6-week session. So even if you have a low class at 10 kids, that's $850 for 6 weeks. If you do the calculations, a private person will only get $210 for 6 weeks, and lifelong learning will take the remaining revenue. If you have 20 kids in the class, that comes to them taking 87% and you receiving 13%. If you're an LLC, they told me that they'll take 60% and give me 40%. This is not, I've never heard of such a high percentage, and I teach at private schools, and they're typically higher, and the highest I've had is 25% that they take of the revenue, which is fine. But for lifelong learning to take 60% is too expensive for a lot of people to function. And this has promoted a strategy of other companies to use a sort of a shotgun approach where they put advertisements on Craigslist and fill their chess classes with instructors that have minimal knowledge. In fact, I've printed a Craigslist ad on the paper of a company called Strategic Kids that uses this model where they hire, they're in about 15 schools right now from my count, and they just use a shotgun approach to hire as many people off Craigslist as they can at $15 an hour, and then they can take the remaining revenue that they haven't given to lifelong learning. This has caused a sharp decline in the quality of education. I know it may be difficult to imagine, but chess is like a very complex game for those of you that don't play, and it has values beyond a game. And I try to help my students learn friendly competition. They learn strategy. I have a curriculum that I've developed for over many, many years. I have 10 years of practice, and I'm a chess master. And I have parents that want me to teach in schools, but I can't get in because lifelong learning wants to take 60%. I met with them, with the head, Dr. Melinda Groom, and is my time? Okay. So I met with the head, Dr. Melinda Groom, to discuss this, and she wasn't amenable to any discussion. And I'm hoping to motivate a certain change in policy so that we can promote chess in the community at a fair percentage for the teachers instead of promoting these other companies that just hire random people off Craigslist, despite the fact that the parents are paying a lot of money. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Shashank Shakur. Good evening, sir. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Shashank Shekhar. I'm a software engineer by profession. I've lived and worked in Boulder since about 1998. Until about a year back, I used to run a programming class, after-school programming class, and summer camps for kids, teaching them computer programming and electronics. I have a master's degree in computer science from CU Boulder. And my experience, I'm here to second what Josh was saying earlier, is in about a year of holding these after-school classes and camps in various schools in BVST, at the time at least, the percentage that I had to share with lifelong learning was 50%. And just like chess, if not more, computer programming, to find a quality teacher to teach such classes, they're expensive. They would rather go work and find a real programming job. So while I could hire CU students to teach these classes, it was very hard to sustain and offer them a minimum number of hours and a certain remuneration with the high percentage that I had to share with BBST lifelong learning. And the biggest challenge was often the classes, the enrollment was not as high. I mean, for the amount of percentage that I shared, I guess the marketing aspect of it is all done through lifelong learning. And we had so many classes that got canceled at the last minute because we didn't meet the minimum. And with that kind of a dynamics, it's very hard to kind of hire a teacher and tell them, okay, you'll at least make this much through the summer for offering all the summer camps and teaching at the summer camps. So I pretty much share the sentiments that Josh mentioned here, that for these highly skilled kind of classes, it's hard to bring those classes to children in the BVST community. And I know there is a market for sure. There's lots of parents and lots of students who love these classes, but it just wasn't sustainable to bring it to them at a good quality level teaching, essentially. So that's basically what I wanted to share in support of what Josh said.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Rick Christie, who has been given an additional 2 minutes from Jeanette Tully. Mr. Christie, welcome. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Rick Christie. I'm a retired Boulder Valley principal and grandfather of 3 Boulder Valley kids. When I was a principal, I really felt that chess was a great thing for kids, and my research and the research that I've read indicates the same. The kids become more analytical, their concentration skills are great, and it's really for all kids. It's for gifted kids, it's for learning disabled kids. In fact, there was a tournament this summer that was just for children of disabilities playing chess. There were blind kids, autistic kids, and kids with cerebral palsy that all played in this championship. As a principal, I tried to promote chess whenever I could, and I did a chess class after school. Fridays, we opened up the library, so when the kids finished lunch, they could come and do chess. Well, I retired, and now I'm an employee of PERA. And so my wife, who was principal at Louisville Middle School, asked me to come and start a chess club. So I did that, and I'm still doing that today. We had about 25 kids in the chess club there, and the kids love chess. They're really passionate about it. We had a thing called the Boulder Valley Chess League, and it's kind of a loose organization where schools within Boulder Valley could compete with each other and play chess. And we really loved it. But then we found out that, no, you can't do that in Boulder Valley because chess is a club, not an intramural, and so we're not allowed to travel. So we stopped that. So later I decided I would teach elementary chess classes after school. And so I taught a class at Coal Creek. Had about 25, 30 kids. It was a great class, a lot of support there. And it went beautifully. Well, later on, I found that you can't do a chess class. You can't rent space, even though you have insurance and all that kind of thing. You can't do a chess class right after school. The rules have changed. Now, in order to rent a space in the school district, you have to wait 1 hour after school's out, and then you can rent. Well, that botched it. There was no way I could teach a class, without, like that. So I thought, okay, well, I'll teach through community schools, I mean, it doesn't pay well, but I'm a para guy. I don't need it, So I signed up to teach through community schools. And I had 4 schools that I could teach in Louisville. And so I went to the first school to set up the class, and I wanted to put up a flyer so that they would know it existed. Well, I was told, no, community school says you can't put up a flyer. You can't advertise your class. The only way you can advertise classes is through the community school's flyer and on the website. Well, 2 of the classes didn't make. One class I had 3 students, which I went ahead and did. And then the other class I had 7 students. That was at Coal Creek, where I had taught previously. And 4 of the 7 students were kids that I had in the class previously, and the 5th was a younger brother of another student that I'd had before. So anyway, it was kind of all for naught. I really don't plan on doing that any longer. It's too bad. I think chess is a great thing, and I know that the research for chess is pretty complete. I know it's good for kids, and I just want to see, I'd like for us to re-examine our policies and see why we're getting in the way of kids getting chess. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jennifer Benson. Ms. Benson, good evening. Welcome.
Right. Hello, my name is Jennifer Benson. I am a former public school counselor and a current student at CU Law School. And I spent my summer working at Harvard Law School's Food Law and Policy Clinic and wanted to share some information from my work there on school food waste policy that was included in a report that was just released today. So first, we've all heard that food waste is a huge issue in the United States. It's estimated that 40% of the food produced in the U.S. is wasted. Schools waste about 2 pounds of food per student per month on average, which accounts for about 26% of schools' total food budget. So reducing food waste can reduce the school's food and waste disposal costs while also creating good habits for students and school employees. When it comes to school food policy, Boulder is really ahead of the curve. Boulder is referenced multiple times in the Harvard report, and you should be very proud of the work you've done here, including some exemplary food waste reduction practices like recycling food scraps for animal feed and composting food for use in school gardens. And school gardens and other education initiatives themselves are helpful in reducing food waste because students who are engaged with their food have been shown to waste less. So some additional best practices Boulder schools may want to consider if they're not already in place include extending lunch periods and having recess before lunch, which can result in less wasted food as well as increased fruit and vegetable consumption. And also creating share tables like those that are already in place at Douglas Elementary, or donating surplus food, which is allowed under the National School Lunch Program and is legally protected under the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act. So in closing, I want to say I am very proud to be part of a community that has such progressive views on school food policy and is really taking some important steps towards reducing the amount of food wasted in our schools. So keep up the good work. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to help, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Emily Dreeling. I hope I got your last name right. Welcome. Good evening.
Hello. I'm Emily Dreiling, and I'm currently a second-year law student at the University of Colorado. I also attended CU for my undergraduate education, so I've lived in the Boulder Valley for a combined 6 years of my life. Prior to law school, I also had a brief stint of 3 years working for a tech company. There's two things I'd like to present to you today. One is an applaud, and the second a recommendation. I'd first like to applaud the wonderful work that you all have done regarding school gardening programs. I, like my colleague Jennifer, am very interested in school gardening programs. I've been interested in them since I took nutrition in my undergraduate education, and I commend you all for doing a great job. I was especially impressed by your Garden as a Classroom manual. It's incredibly thorough, and I think you all have done a great job with that initiative, showing kids that gardening is accessible and easy and interesting. Which then brings me to my recommendation. Coming from a STEM background, I'm a strong advocate in encouraging students to gain important skills in the STEM field. While I greatly appreciate the strides you have made through STEM summer programs, I would encourage you all to look at expanding and developing a STEM program similar to the School Gardens Initiative, specifically providing students with tools to see that STEM is fun and accessible and not a scary area to be in. Because STEM jobs are getting harder and harder to fill here in the state, a positive STEM-based education is a great way to set students up for success. Because you all did such a wonderful job with School Gardens, I recommend you take a look at doing the same with a STEM program. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Egbe Semwani. I apologize if I mispronounce your name, but good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Igbe. I'm one of the children's mother for the chess program that Josh is talking about today. What will I say? So during the beginning of the semester, I asked my son if he wanted to take chess because there's a chess after school program at his school, and he said no, it's always the same thing. He doesn't want to take it this time. So I said, okay, maybe Josh could do it. He said, yeah. So I asked Josh because he said he was going to he's going to be a full-time, he's going to go into full-time being a chess teacher. So I said, okay, maybe I could talk to the school, and maybe that might be a good source of revenue for him or an opportunity for him. So I went ahead and I spoke to them, and she said, yeah, they were going to meet with him, but I don't know what happened after. I guess after the discussion, based on the way the program is, like he talked about, it wasn't going to work out. So I was kind of disappointed. So I think from what he said, all the research he has talked about to you guys, I think it'll be something that you guys should consider because I believe chess is a very good skill for kids to have. There was even something, I think it was CBS, they talked about somewhere far away in Alabama where a guy introduced chess and the kids just playing chess in school changed the whole attitude for the kids, and they had a future. They were like, and they're doing very well. I think it was on CBS. So I think it's a good chess is a good form. I know how it has helped my son in ways of mostly strategy and something like if he doesn't do well in school, he doesn't see it as a failure but as a learning curve. And Josh talks about that anytime they have chess, the kids don't like cry or anything. It's like, okay, you didn't do well, but you didn't fail, but you're learning new ways of doing things. So I think those things are key than just putting anybody to go and teach something that they are not used to. I think someone that is skilled and is interested in making kids better, I think those are the kind of people that should teach kids because the kids pick up things, based on the teacher. If you just teach them something poorly, they're going to learn poorly all the ways of their life. So I believe someone that has a passion for it is the key. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our final speaker this evening is Michelle Crawford. Ms. Crawford, good evening. Welcome.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, School Board, for allowing me to speak. My name is Michelle Crawford. I live in Lafayette, Colorado. I've been a BVSD parent for the last 13 years as well as a volunteer. In early 2017, the City of Lafayette passed the Climate Bill of Rights, essentially banning fracking in the city limits. However, on October 17th of this year, the City of Lafayette passed a controversial moratorium on oil and gas, which undermines the city's Climate Bill of Rights. The moratorium is a political move, delaying the City of Lafayette from imposing the ban while allowing the November election to proceed in hopes to rid Lafayette's council of any supporters of the Climate Bill of Rights. The tactic may be successful and eventually allow oil and gas to frack in the city of Lafayette with unabated fervor in our city and in our open spaces, which includes fracking behind Pioneer Elementary and possibly other Boulder Valley schools, directly impacting the well-being of all BVSD students. While this school board cannot deal with the conflict brewing in Lafayette, it can act and lead the way for other organizations involved in public education to say no to fracking in Boulder County. Taking a stand sends a message. Waiting idly by to see what happens gets you a fracking rig at Pioneer Elementary's playground. While parents are in a pure amazement and astonishment at the inaction of administrators and teachers, I hope they understand that it is another governed body, the teachers' union, that must stand up as well and say no to fracking for the health and well-being of their employees. However, waiting on a lobbying group such as the teachers' union may be a futile effort and time is running out. Why bother with school security when under your watch, students may be poisoned every day with water contamination, carbon emissions, and noise so overwhelming? Students with any needs will be the least of your worries. If BVSD turns a blind eye to fracking at their schools like Erie and Weld County, you are playing a dangerous game with our children's lives. This is no time for party politics or pooling of candidates. This battle is being fought all over the country. Take the time to investigate earthquake-riddled communities in fracked Oklahoma or battles fought and won by leaders like Mark Ruffalo in the state of New York. Otherwise, we're just wasting time and keeping party rhetoric and platforms afloat with the same message. I'm anti-fracking. Anti-fracking means nothing when coupled with talk about setbacks, noise abatement, and reducing emitting odors. Anti-fracking leaves room for negotiation. A fracking ban is clear, concise, and terminal. Please take the time to stand up against fracking in Boulder and in BVSD schools. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes public participation for this evening. We'll move to, we thank all our speakers for addressing the board. We'll move to the next item on our agenda, which is board communication. Board members, who would like to begin? Tina?
Yeah, thanks for all the speakers who shared their different perspectives today. And I just had just one comment about the community Montessori expansion. I think that when we had our discussion last time, we did address that this was, or that the recommendation did not say that the expansion was off the table. So I just wanted to be clear about that. And then I would like to hear a little more about the lifelong learning. I have also received a couple anecdotal stories about some issues with the lifelong learning at just one or two schools, and how that has created some changes. And I realize we have change, and change is difficult, but I would like to just make sure that we did the right thing in terms of getting the balance right between the lifelong learning goals and then also making sure we're getting the best resources for our kids. And then finally, I had asked a question about wells near schools, and I think the latest check was a couple months ago, if I recall. We don't have any schools or wells that are slated to be within the setback, but I would like to check. And I do understand your message is an anti-fracking message. It's not a setback message per se, but I would like to just double check that the proposed well for Pioneer would not be within the setback that has been agreed upon for schools. I know that a couple of representatives are asking to increase that setback, which I think is a great idea, and I hope that happens, but it's very difficult in this climate to think that that might.
Thanks, Tina. Kathy?
I see my law student has left, but I wanted to say kudos to the law students for coming and exercising their skill at public speaking. I really appreciated them coming and talking and sharing some good news and some points for how to improve. I echo Tina's request that maybe we look a little bit into lifelong learning, and so I won't go on to that any further. I know I get a little bit of grief for my shout-outs to Fairview, but the boys' tennis team at Fairview took state for the first time in a very long time, so I just want to do a shout-out, beat our arch rival Cherry Creek, and took #1, so that was a pretty exciting event at one of our local high schools. Yesterday, Jenny and Shelley and I were at the meeting with the Superior Council, and it was a very nice meeting, and I hope that we can have more frequent meetings, because as I learned, the last time we met with them was 7 years ago, and I think meeting with our local governments is something that we might want to think about doing with a little more frequency. But one of the issues that they raised was a conversation, I think, is what they were asking for around tuition-based full-day kindergarten. And so maybe when we start talking about agenda setting and whatnot, we can start exploring that a little bit, since we have in the bond promised that there would be space for kindergarten, and now how do we, without the the support from the state, how do we meet that need that I think our community is trying to figure out? So I think having that conversation would be a good thing. But my kudos to Rob Price for handling some challenging questions about delays and scheduling and the bond and all of that, because I thought he handled the questions really well, and I thought the council was very happy that we could come and answer those questions for them and try to preemptively answer some of the other issues that they had, including the K-8 delay, which isn't impacting programming, but is nonetheless a delay. So I just wanted to do kudos to Rob for a good job handling all of those questions. I don't think any of us at the table could have answered them without Rob's help. And then I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but as you all remember, you allowed me to be your delegate to the CASB Delegate Assembly, and Jenny was the timer, and aside from a quip about her being the size of a Broncos linebacker because of her ability to cut everybody off at the timing, it was actually pretty humorous. We all looked at Jenny and went, what? What I would say is that overall, anything that infringed on local control was defeated. So anything that talked about, we want to have, one of the things that Tina had raised, we want to have more guidance on how to do social emotional learning, that was shot down. So anything that even hinted of the state or CASB or CDE telling any district how to better govern or to better implement programs was pretty much uniformly shot down. There was a fair amount of conversation around school finance. Several of the more lengthy resolutions were withdrawn. I think it's just a general understanding that we want to continue to work towards school finance. And then, just as an aside, there seems to be a fair amount of misunderstanding still, even amongst CASB members, around marijuana revenues and how much they are and what they're used for. And so hopefully we were able to set some of that straight at the microphone. So I'm happy to share any more specifics. There were a lot of resolutions, and I don't want to take all the time tonight to go through them all, but I appreciated the feedback from the board. I think we were able to implement the requested changes and represent Boulder well. So those are my comments for tonight, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks to you and Jenny for being there. Other comments, board members? Jenny.
So I'm going to piggyback on what Kathy said in a couple of respects and say that I enjoyed the meeting with Superior Town Council, and it has been a while since we've met with any of our councils, and it's a good practice that I hope the next board will pick up on it and get back. I mean, during my time on the board, I think we've met with everybody except the Boulder County Commissioners, and hopefully we'll start back on a schedule where we do a little bit more of that. I think it's useful to have that elected official to elected official contact, although I am aware that that there's quite a lot of interaction between the staffs of our respective communities and the district. But the elected official contact is helpful. And I was really glad to hear the conversation about tuition-based full-day kindergarten, because I'd just been talking about that in my own community with some constituents in my own community, so I know it's a pressing need in a couple of my schools. And the thing about it that disappointed me was that I had understood, we had been told last year, that we had a staff committee working on a proposal that would come forward to us this year for implementation next school year. I guess that had fallen by the wayside with some of the confusion, anyway. And I hope that we'll start that back up again, because I think it's pretty clear to me that the state is not going to fund full day kindergarten anytime soon. But I feel like when I go into my schools that do have full day kindergarten, they are so grateful. They think that they're doing such wonderful. I mean, they just feel like they're getting such good results with the kids, and they're moving students along, and they're able to provide programming at a better pace. When you have to do an entire day's worth of curriculum in 2.5 hours, you really push kindergartners along at a breakneck pace. And I don't spend a ton of time around 5-year-olds, but as I recall, it's impossible to push them that far without really sad results. So, or that hard. So I think that there are a number of benefits to going to a full day model, and I think there's a demand in our community. And so I hope that work will start up again, Cindy. And then I'd like to reiterate, I really enjoyed the CASB Fall Delegate Assembly, and I'd urge everybody who's on the board next year to at least consider going and attending. They had breakout programs that were really helpful about, teacher evaluations and schools on the accountability clock were 2 really good panels. And then they had 9 of the current 10 governor candidates showed up. Gubernatorial candidates showed up, and several of them stayed after for the reception afterwards. So there was a real opportunity to meet with and to see those candidates firsthand. And I found that really helpful to hear what they had to say about public education, and because it's really hard because there's so many people running to figure things out without that firsthand opportunity. And so that was really good. And then the other thing that's really helpful, I think, is just hearing the conversation. As the timekeeper, I could listen to what people were saying without worrying about whether I was going to need to respond or not. And the variety of points of view from all over our state is really a great opportunity. I think we kind of tend to live in a bubble here in Boulder Valley, and it's not our fault, and it's a great bubble to live in, I have to say. I enjoy it. But to hear other points of view and the way certain policies might affect other school districts is really helpful. That's just an opportunity to hear other points of view that I think can't be underestimated. And then I appreciate the people who came out to talk tonight, many of whom have already left, but I would like to comment that I think chess is great for kids too. And I was really sad to learn that we're not allowed to travel and let kids compete with other schools, because when I was a talented and gifted coordinator at Aspen Creek many years ago now, we did that occasionally. And the kids really valued that opportunity. And to the extent that we have an opportunity to bring in chess instructors who are better qualified than I to teach chess, I think we ought to make those opportunities available to kids. And certainly there ought to be a way to build some flexibility into our system if it's around programs that we know would be good for kids. And I wonder if that kind of extracurricular programming, I know that the athletics subcommittee that Shelley is on has its plate full, but that kind of extracurricular programming might be, that might be a place where that could be looked at and policy recommendations could be developed. Oh, and then whoever said, I think she's gone now, but whoever suggested that we have recess before lunch, I believe that's happening in many of our schools, and I'm a big fan of recess before lunch because from my own personal experience, I know that if kids are racing through their lunch so they can get out to recess, they don't eat. Thank you for...
Thanks, Jenny. Shelley?
Yeah, I want to thank everyone who came forward to speak tonight. I guess I don't want to repeat everything everyone said, but Cindy, do you think it would be possible to maybe recap for the board how our policies around lifelong learning pricing have changed maybe over the last few years? Because I've heard about things being high, you know, citizens paying taxes, and why do they have to pay that much for lifelong learning classes and stuff? And I don't know how much there is to that. I'd just like to understand, what we're doing there. And I guess I would ask the same thing around chess. I know when my kids were in elementary school, someone came in to teach them chess after school, and that was discontinued while they were there, and I know how disappointed they were. And I think at the time that one was for good reason, because I believe they just didn't want unsupervised people in the classrooms teaching chess, and I think it was a little loose at this particular school. So I'm not criticizing that decision, but I also think I've lost track of all the policies around chess and what we're doing. So it would be good to get an overview of that. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Shelley. Tom, anything? Okay. And I'll just second Shelley and Jenny's comments about getting some information on the lifelong learning changes and support for bringing chess to our kids. It's a great game. I'm not very good at it, but I do enjoy it. Thanks, everybody. We'll move to the next item on our agenda, which is an information item, an update on our social emotional learning in the Boulder Valley School District. Dr. Stevenson?
Yes. As you know, you all could come. Andrew, it's fine. Come on up. You're in good shape. You all know that Boulder Valley School District has taken the lead in social emotional learning. It has been very thoughtful about how we're working with kids. Part of that thoughtfulness is the elementary counselors, and part of it has been looking at what does the literature tell us, what does research tell us. And we have people who have worked a lot with the Castle research and really understand how to work with our counselors and our teachers and our schools around what's quality social emotional learning for our children. So tonight, as you see, we have Andrew Tucker and we have Tammy Lawrence. And Sam, are you just hanging out with them, or are you part of this? You're just Sam's just hanging out with them because they're really cool. But Andrew and Tammy will be presenting tonight on Boulder Valley Schools Social Emotional Learning Program. So Andrew, welcome.
Thank you. President Fuqua, members of the board, Dr. Stevenson, thanks for having me tonight. We are excited to give you an update on all of the great work that we have done. As you will remember, about a year and a half ago, we invited Castle, and many of you met with them at that time, to come and help us understand where we were and what we needed to do to implement a social and emotional learning program system-wide. So I'm excited today or this evening, to help give a little bit of an update on what we're doing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to update you on the elementary school counseling program that with your support, we were able to implement for this school year. Tammy Lawrence is our new Assistant Director of Student Support, who will help give that update. And then we'll also want to give you some update on the progress from the Castle report from a year and a half ago. In that conversation, we'll talk about some of our connections with CU Boulder and how CU Boulder and staff at CU Boulder is helping us to implement some of this work, and some of the grant programs that we've been able to acquire thanks to our focus on this work. So, just as a reminder, the areas that we're really focusing on and the major focus are creating caring environments and relationships with students so that they feel loved, supported, and nurtured. Provide students with opportunities and specific skills, because that's really what social and emotional learning is about, right? Is learning specific skills that will foster their social and emotional competence, happiness, and well-being. And then promoting educators' social and emotional competence and well-being as well. Because as we know, if we do not have our own social and emotional competence and don't have good self-regulation ourselves and good social skills ourselves and don't make good responsible decisions ourselves, it's a very difficult thing to teach our kids. So it's important to reach out and work with everyone across the system in order to promote positive social and emotional learning. So the first priority from the Castle report was to align budget and staffing to support social and emotional learning. So with that, thanks again to the support, your support, we were able to add a 0.5 FTE for an assistant director of student support in Tammy Lawrence. We were able to make that job, that position whole as a 1.0 through grant funding and other sources, some Medicaid funding and other sources. We, as you know, were able to hire 10 elementary school counselors for this year, 10 FTE. They are to serve all of our 30 elementary schools, or 30 of elementary schools. Our current ratio, just for your knowledge, is 1 to 907 or 1,465. So we're well above the American School Counselor recommended ratio of 1 to 250, but we're hoping that over time we'll be able to get there, as you know. And we also were able to add a couple of behavioral health advocates. They are the folks that work with our students with more intensive needs, our social and emotional needs in our elementary schools, to make it 5 total. We already had 3 on board, and we added 2 more with the funding that you approved in June. And in that funding line, there was also $50,000 for professional learning and materials, which we are putting to good use. We also realigned some staff roles to lead this work, so I spend a significant portion of my time working in this area, as does our Assistant Director of Research and Assessment, Bridget Mutter. So we aren't, our funding, our FTE is not specifically allocated one way or the other, but we spend a significant portion of our time in this work as well. So, as you know, I think social and emotional learning falls under the umbrella of multi-tiered system of supports that's led by Maya Jorgensen this year and Sam Messier and others. Social and emotional learning really it falls under the layered continuum of supports, though it's very important to understand that social and emotional learning, it falls under database problem solving as well, family, school, and community partnering, and evidence-based practices, team-driven shared leadership. All of the tiers, all of the components of MTSS are key in SEL, and SEL really falls under the umbrella of MTSS, so we just want to point that out to you. With that in mind, I want to bring, at this point in time, up Tammy Lawrence, who's going to talk about how we use kind of the MTSS layered continuum of supports to help define our elementary school counseling program for our principals and school staff.
Good evening. It's nice to meet all of you. This is the first time I've been able to be in front of you, and I want to thank you for the support. This program is very exciting, and I am so fortunate that I get to work alongside Andy Tucker, Sandy Ripplinger, and Robin Fernandez in this work. And so we were very fortunate and able to find 10 very amazing, highly skilled school counselors to come in, and they are very excited about the work that they are doing. And the first place that we really started was, how are we going to ensure that the counselors spread out over 3 buildings are being utilized in being able to service as many students as possible. And really their primary target is for that universal layer and working with all students. And so we created a layered continuums of support for them, really identifying that their primary focus is in that universal support area and supporting the schools and where they are with their social emotional learning implementation. Also, being able to talk about career awareness, something that does get talked about in elementary, but how can they support the teachers in those conversations? And knowing that we want to bring social emotional learning into the setting to help support them in their college and career readiness when they get through 12th grade and move on to post-secondary education. And also working with that targeted supports if there's any additional supports needed within the schools, and working with small groups in that space. And then what we have been able to do, the counselors have been starting to collect high-level data on how many students they've been able to serve. And so far to date, 1,050 students have been supported from the elementary school counselors. They have run 203 small groups and been in 853 classrooms. The topics that they have been able to talk with students and through classroom presentations have been conflict resolution, self-regulation, stress and anxiety, social skills, friendship groups, and transition skills. The first principal meeting that we had in September, the principals came together, and it was the first time that they had an opportunity to collaborate with one another about the work that's been happening in each of their buildings. And so Sandy led them into a group where they were able to get in small groups that they shared a small with their counselor. And some of the highlights and the celebrations that they were able to provide for us is that counselors are providing social skill lessons. They're in classrooms. They're valuable opportunities for consultation with teachers and district leadership. Identified multiple topics for social emotional learning supports within the buildings. They're able to sit on PBIS meetings and able to collaborate with others in the building to provide additional insight. They reach out to parents and are working with community organizations, and they attend PD that supports each building. Our focus really is to support each building and where they are with their social emotional learning targets and the curriculum that is being taught in their schools. And so far to date, it's been a positive experience. They are working in supporting everyone that they can. And with that, I will turn it back over to Andy.
I want to highlight how great a job Tammy is doing in leading this group by collecting all the data that she's collecting with the group. Tammy mentioned, but it's really important that you know that the 10 people that we were able to hire are of incredibly high quality. We had people move into our state to take these roles because we are on the cutting edge with this. There are very few elementary school counseling jobs in the state of Colorado. They exist, but they don't exist in large numbers. And so people who really want to do that work with the younger children are very, very excited. So Tammy and the team are doing an amazing job. They've bonded, they meet regularly, and they really are doing incredible work for students. So for that first, I think we've done incredible work thus far in that first major priority area that Castle pointed out. So let me talk about the other ones that we've been working on as well, because I think we've made inroads in the other ones as well. Though the elementary counselors and the behavioral health advocates and others that we have been able to get into schools have really made a tremendous difference already. So priority number 2 that Castle mentioned to us, or that they recommended to us, was that we develop a resource and needs assessment. So in other words, that we figure out what our schools are doing, because we know we are a site-based and local control and site-based district, and so different schools have been doing social and emotional learning for quite some time, and different schools were doing different things, and we needed to really dive in and figure out what they were doing and at what effectiveness. So with partners from CU Boulder, and I think we've talked with you about this before, but with our partners at CU Boulder in the Department of Psychology and Neuroscience, we developed a resource and needs assessment that was very in-depth. Last year, the MTSS leadership teams in the schools completed, and every school in our district completed this resource and needs assessment, and it ended up being very much a self-reflective tool for the schools. It was not evaluative at all from our perspective. For us, it was informational. But for them, what it ended up being was very self-evaluative. This year, as a follow-up to that, what we are in development of phase 2 of this resource and needs assessment, which is going to be more of a walkthrough tool, and I'll give you a little bit more information about that in a minute. Moving along, priority number 3 was to communicate with stakeholders about social and emotional learning. We've done some presentations for you all, which hopefully the community is seeing as well. We have a UIP goal this year, and we had one last year, focused on social and emotional learning. We've made presentations to the District Accountability Committee and to the Teachers Advisory Council. Those are just a few of the groups that we've presented to. I'll tell you about more as we go. Priority number 4 was to design and implement SEL professional learning. This is a big one, right? Because in order to do social and emotional learning, in order to expand this learning to all of our schools, our educators have to know how to do it, right? It's not, a lot of people believe that social and emotional learning has to be a curriculum, it has to be a really robust program. And that absolutely adds to the work and adds to the program. However, there are lots of practices that people can do to build those safe, caring communities and to build relationships with kids that are so important. So we have been working with teachers and with staff across the district to provide professional learning. This year, as you may be aware, the Division of Instructional Services and Equity is doing for all teachers. We have the professional pathways. We had 4 pathways that reached 135 classroom teachers specifically dedicated to social and emotional learning. We did presentations at all DLT meetings last year in the 2016-17 school year that all meetings began with SEL protocols. We still try to begin every meeting that we have, and I should have done it here, and I'm kicking myself at the moment, but we should have done it here to begin all meetings with SEL protocols. Maybe we'll do one in a minute if you guys want to get up and have a movement break. And then we also met with all new employees. All new educators had a new educator orientation. We gave them a 2-hour introduction to what social and emotional learning is and some tools that they could use the first day of class as they walked in to work with students, and then that would continue that work throughout the school year. The 5th priority that CASEL recommended was to develop a vision and a long-term plan for SEL. You'll notice the folks that are sitting here today represent a number of our departments, and that's intentional because we are working together as a larger group of district directors to really ensure that social and emotional learning cuts across all content areas. Because realistically, the work of social and emotional learning, the school counselors and others in the schools can be the champions, but it's the work of everybody. It's the work of everybody to create caring and classroom environments for students and to help students build social skills, to build self-regulation skills, and to make responsible decisions. So we're working as a larger group consistently to do this. We have regular meetings with all school counseling staff to ensure that they are the leaders. And our goal is to define a long-term plan by June of 2019. The reason it is pushed out that far is obviously we are in a leadership transition at the moment, so we want to get our new superintendent on board when that happens to build that plan with the new superintendent. Priority number 6 is to establish systems of continuous improvement. Social and emotional learning has been in our UIP strategies to engage in MTSS this year. You'll see, particularly in item number 3 on the screen, that schools this year must complete one of the following instruments before May 15th of 2018. You'll remember last year they had to complete the resource and needs assessment that I discussed earlier. This year they'll either complete a PBIS tiered fidelity inventory, and PBIS is positive behavior interventions and supports, and it's a program that we've had for many, many, many years in the district. So for schools that have well-established PBIS systems, that's what they'll want to do. For schools that maybe haven't focused on that in a little while, they'll do the second version, the version 2 that's in development right now of the BVSD SEL resource and needs assessment that we're developing with our partners at CU. That is it'll be a walkthrough tool. So the idea is, okay, in the first SEL resource and needs assessment, you, school people, said that you're had these programs and these practices in your school to support social and emotional learning, right? So now we're gonna come and we're gonna walk through your school with your MTSS teams, not us necessarily, but the MTSS leadership teams are gonna walk through the schools and see where they see those practices happening. Where do you see it in policy in your schools? Where do you see it in practice? it actually is the precursor. The PBIS tiered fidelity inventory has a walkthrough, recommends a walkthrough. They don't recommend a specific walkthrough, but they recommend a walkthrough as part of it. So we felt like this would be a good intermediate step, and will help schools to really determine and define their SEL practice in a much more cohesive way. Priority number 7, identify and adopt evidence-based SEL programs. Well, we're doing this in lots of different ways. We've received funding for numerous grant opportunities, as you'll see there, to support this work. One of the major grant opportunities that we have received that I think you're aware of is the Kaiser Permanente Thriving Schools grant, which was a highly competitive grant that we did win. It allowed us to put the Let's Connect program, which has been developed at the Institute of Behavioral Science at CU Boulder, helped us to put that into both the Netherlands schools and into Fairview. Second step is being offered at Columbine Elementary, which is an evidence-based SEL program through the bully prevention grant that we received from CDE. We have a partnership with PassageWorks, who is a local organization that does a lot of work around social and emotional learning, particularly for adults, to provide SMART classes, which stands for stress management and relaxation techniques. It's specifically for educators, to offer those classes to school staff at a reduced price. It's voluntary. And many other schools have adopted and implemented evidence-based curricula. We have other grants that we've received as well that are provided, that Stephanie Farron, who's sitting here, who's our coordinator of health and wellness in the district, oversees, that have helped us to put other SEL programs in our schools as well. I can give you more information about that if you'd like in a minute. Priority 8 was to review and adopt SEL standards. We believe this is future work. We believe this is work that's going to come once we've done more professional learning, once we've had time to really help give some skills. This is bigger work that will take a little more time. We realize this initiative is 3 to 5 years. So that's future work that will come. Priority 9 is to strengthen adult social and emotional competence and district expertise. We've talked already about professional pathways. I mentioned a minute ago the SMART classes that we're being able to offer at a reduced price, the DLT meetings that we discussed earlier, and we work closely with MTSS teams already throughout the district to help them to understand the tools that are out there. Finally, how do we integrate SEL into existing district priorities in classroom instruction? It is very strongly integrated within multi-tiered system of supports and equity. We realize that SEL ultimately is a program that focuses on equity, right? When we give all students the skills that they need to thrive as human beings, the social skills that they need, the self-regulation skills that they need, the self-awareness that they need, then that ultimately can help to level the playing field for all. There's been, as we've discussed already, collaboration amongst all departments and lots of interdisciplinary efforts. We have begun building an SEL toolkit with simple strategies for classroom teachers at the universal level. So what are things that individual classroom teachers can do? That is web-based, and it's within our MTSS system. And finally, we're building out targeted and intensive social and emotional and behavior supports within MTSS. So I've given you a ton of information. But I think that what I hope you've seen is that in the 18 months or slightly more since Castle was here, we've put a lot of effort and a lot of time into this and view it as, somebody said it, and I don't remember who it was, but somebody said that, it's pretty cutting edge work. And, I think that with the team that's here and all the people that have been involved in this work, and Bridget Mutter, who unfortunately couldn't be here, who is my right-hand person in all of this, we have really accomplished a lot in a short period of time, and a lot of that is thanks to the support that we've had from you. So we thank you for that. What questions can I answer?
Well, thank you, Andy, and thank you, Tammy. That was very informative, and we're encouraged. Board members, what questions do you have? We'll start with Tina.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation, and and this is just so exciting, and I'm so glad this is finally happening in our district. And I commend all of you for working so hard on this. And my only comment, this is a lot to take in, it's so specific and so helpful, is I would love to visit a school where this is happening and just to see what it looks like at some point. No sense of urgency. Right?
And important to know, and that one of the big things we found, Tina, in our in the resource and needs assessment, one of our big findings is that it's happening everywhere. And that's the beauty, is that it's happening everywhere, and it's happening, in some schools we have very robust programs that are happening. In some schools it's much more in individual classrooms or with champion teachers, but it is definitely happening everywhere. And because realistically, SEL is a new concept, right? I mean, it's building upon initiatives that have been going on for quite some time, character education, amongst other things.
Andy, could you send me maybe 5 or 6 schools that you would recommend, and then we can get that out to you so you have that opportunity?
You bet.
Thank you.
Kathy?
I want to echo what Tina just said. I think this has been amazing work, and 853 classrooms visited is pretty awesome to think about. I'm tempted to ask what the SEL protocol is, but I don't know if the board wants to get up and take a break, but I'm just curious what starting each meeting with the SEL protocol looks like.
So you start. So you start every meeting with an optimistic. You start every meeting with an with an energizer. Then you get up, you have a movement break, and then you have an optimistic closing at the end.
I like that.
Always.
Can you talk about how the counselors work? Because some of the things we've heard are the different roles that social workers play versus counselors, and how that's working, and what the interplay is between the work that the social workers are doing in the schools and the counselors.
Sure. School counselors are licensed school counselors, and we intentionally hired and sought licensed school counselors for this because their training in their protocols and the American School Counseling Association national model is all about serving all students in a variety of realms. In our district, and most districts, school social workers are supported through special education dollars, and they work primarily with students on IEPs. So that's the large difference, is that the school counselors work with all students, while school social workers work primarily with students on IEPs.
Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Appreciate the work and the discussion here. We used to do these climate surveys in schools, and I haven't seen any of those in a while, that we would assess things like depression and bullying and self-esteem and things of that nature. Do you see this kind of data coming out of what you're doing, and at least so we know what things are going on and how we might address those?
So we did have a school climate survey that was sunsetted, a couple of years ago, and I'm not the best person to answer this question, so I'll do my best, but I can get more information if necessary. A new school climate survey is under development currently, so we hope to have more information beginning on a piloting basis this year.
Okay. All right. I'm disappointed that we haven't seen those. It helped us to get a feeling that we can't get a good feeling of, otherwise, So also I'm a little bit curious about, you talked about the implementation of these evidence-based curricula, the details. Can you give me just a few details about that?
Sure. So there is evidence-based curricula happening all over the district. So, for example, Second Step, which is one of the, a lot of people would say is one of the premier SEL programs out there, curricula out there. We have numerous schools that are using Second Step in their schools. For example, and here's a good example, is when Castle came to visit us in the spring of 2016. One of the schools we took them to was Uni Hill. Uni Hill has implemented Second Step along with mindfulness practice in their schools, to the extent that when we left that school, Castle said, this is a model school that we would bring anybody to see how social and emotional learning should be done. So that's one way to do it. And it's done in classrooms, typically, and along with the support of the school counselors. Now, thank goodness, it helps a lot, and so it happens in classrooms. Generally, it's classroom teachers that are delivering the lessons. Different social and emotional curricula look very, very different, as any curricula does, right? I mean, but generally, they're specific lessons that are given around specific skill development. So you want to teach students how conflict resolution. There's specific conflict resolution lessons, for example. So there are multiple curricula out there. Another one that we're working with is a program called Let's Connect. It's out of the CU Boulder. It's out of the Institute of Behavioral Science at CU Boulder. And we're doing that through that Kaiser grant that I mentioned before. It is a program that's actually targeted more towards helping adults understand from a trauma-informed lens. So understand the traumas the students in the classroom may have gone through and how that may affect behavior. To recognize that, learn how to address it, and learn how to recognize it and then address it in such a way that it makes students more comfortable in the classroom and helps them to develop skills from that point forward.
Okay, so you're saying it's often developed at the classroom level. Is it such that the teacher might see some issues in the classroom that she would like to address using this, or how is that determined?
Absolutely. And I wouldn't say developed at the classroom level, but instead implemented at the classroom level. So these are developed. These are programs that are already developed.
Already developed, but they see they see needs within their
Absolutely.
classroom and want to apply this, implement this to address those needs.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Tom. Jenny?
Well, as you know, I'm really excited about this because I've been getting a lot of lobbying from members of my community, even from the extent of, volunteering at a local community blood drive and having a woman I knew who hadn't had children in the school for decades, as far as I know, telling me that we needed elementary school counselors. So I'm really glad we have them, and I'm hearing as I visit the schools in my community that they've been really helpful. I know that, for example, the Emerald community had a death in one of their families, and the counselor was able to help with the school-wide response to that, and the principal was very glad to have turn that responsibility over to someone who I mean, Samara is very good, but I think she felt like it was best handled by a counselor, and it was well handled by a counselor. And so I know that, and I happened to have an opportunity to see the tail end of a lesson today because I was over at Cole Elementary reading to first graders, and I was right behind the elementary counselor in one of those classrooms, and I learned that first graders apparently have a lot of trouble bumping into each other at recess that she will address later, yes, I guess. But anyway, so I'm really excited about that, and I think that's going to be a wonderful thing for our schools. But I do have one question about, just because we've taken some heat about this recently, I noticed that we've added some staff at the Ed Center level, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the value of having the director that you referred to way back in the first slide, I think. What is it called? Anyway, we had it, and we added a half-time person up here.
Right, and that's Tammy.
Okay. Tammy, yes, nothing personal. I just would like to hear more about the value of that.
Of course, and I think that when you're trying to implement a new program with the impact that the elementary school counselors can have, having somebody who can focus on that work and specifically support the elementary school counselors is so unbelievably valuable. The work Tammy has helped to. This position has really helped to define the role, to help principals understand the role. She's evaluating the school counselors directly, so is going around developing programming, developing the data, how to collect the data, to show effectiveness. There's the ways that this is the ways that this supports, I will say, me and the schools and the entire system are so numerous that I can't describe them all. Very frankly, it is a half-time job right now in and of itself, in the sense that getting a program of this magnitude with this potential level of impact off the ground requires the focus of a person. And the great thing about finding Tammy is Tammy's done it before. She did it in Adams 12. She was the director of counseling services K-12, so she had a position very similar to mine in Adams 12 and chose to come here because she was excited to be able to roll out an entire elementary school program.
So if I could paraphrase a little bit, you think that we will reap increased benefits from our investment in elementary school counselors by having a person at the Ed Center who's helping roll out that program?
Undoubtedly.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Shelley?
Thanks, Andrew. I have a question about, I think it's page 6. The pages aren't numbered, but it's the one with the arrows going across the bottom.
Yes.
So on that left-hand side at the bottom, it says monthly analysis of school-wide behavioral data.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could say more about that? What instruments are used? How is it collected? What's it used for? What happens to it? Who gets the information? Just some understanding of how you're measuring.
So this is just data, behavioral data for behavioral incidents, to understand what students that may need additional support, different areas that may need additional support. If there's a lot of conflict, it may lead to conflict resolution, things like that. So bullying incidents, for example, if there are a number of bullying incidents, where can we focus our efforts at the elementary school counseling program in order to support the students in the school best.
Mm-hmm. And where does that data reside?
That data resides, well, you learn it from teachers. We have it in Infinite Campus in many cases. That's where it's supposed to be held, is Infinite
Is
Campus.
that data shared with any outside organizations?
Absolutely not.
Any disciplinary or behavioral data?
No, this is internal for our purposes only.
So it never leaves the BVSD system?
No.
So it looks like this is largely based on PBIS. Is that right? Is that the center sort of?
PBIS is a major component. It's not. It's SEL. PBIS is a major component of, or it supports social and emotional learning. But in and of itself, it is not social and emotional learning. It doesn't encompass everything.
Right. But I notice you have to do it here on the. Schools must complete one of the following before May 15, 2018, PBIS tiered fidelity inventory.
Correct.
And
So-
can you say more about that inventory?
Sure. So it is an inventory that assesses a school's implementation of PBIS and with what level of fidelity they're implementing PBIS.
So they're
as
all
a system.
expected to implement PBIS, right?
Yes, and that's been an expectation for many years in the district.
So, one of the issues with PBIS is that administrators, typically white, middle-aged administrators, set the criteria for what's acceptable behavior.
Right.
And one of the criticisms has been that it doesn't reflect the culture of the student body, for example, that might be a different culture, not just younger, but Latino or different race or whatever. So I'm wondering, have we made any adaptations to ensure that our expectations reflect other cultures?
Well, and I think that's what the tiered fidelity inventory will help schools to address and to assess in themselves, is by looking at the way that their PBIS system is implemented, to really look at any biases that might be inherent into it. Because that's what it's an instrument to help schools really determine what their what level of implementation and what level of fidelity of implementation they have, and within it is an opportunity to look at any issues that they may have along those lines.
Okay, well, typically an inventory is, how well are people doing against these criteria? And what I'm talking about is who's establishing the criteria, and whether the criteria themselves could be an issue. So I just guess I would ask, have we looked at that as a system before we implement this? One of the other criticisms of PBIS is that you don't really identify kids that might have issues until they've resorted to some sort of maladaptive behavior, right? And so I'm wondering, do we have other methods besides waiting until a kid fails and ends up in the principal's office to help that child?
Well, absolutely, and I think therein lies why PBIS is not SEL, right? And why in and of itself it's not. I mean, realistically, we're working with students, and everyone in our system, and especially our school counselors, are trying to provide universal instruction to support all students in a preventative approach. SEL is preventative in nature. In PBIS is as well, but not to the level that SEL is in general.
Right.
The whole concept of SEL is around prevention.
Yeah.
And it's around helping to build the skills that students need. So yes, I think we have lots of things in place to help that.
Okay. And do you know do you use like class cash as a sort of a reward for kids to behave in certain ways?
I mean, does it happen in individual classrooms? Probably.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I wonder if we've looked at that in terms of the impact that has on kids. You know, it's like coaches making everybody run wind sprints when one kid is out
Sure.
of line, and it can have a really negative impact on kids who are behaving and
Of course.
doing well. So I think it would be good to just look and see how that's being utilized, if it is, throughout the district. And then I would just say it's really helpful to see how many kids we've touched with those 10 counselors. I think that sometimes it can be pretty abstract up here to allocate some money and not see how that's really impacting our kids. So thank you for sharing that information.
Yeah, we are, I mean, if you divide that number by 10, you kind of get a sense of,
Yeah.
in the first 2 months, the number of students that, and the number of classrooms and the number of groups that they've each been able to do. It's pretty impressive stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of work. Thanks, Shelley. Did you have an additional question, Kathy?
How are we going to measure our success, assuming that this leads to some successes? I'm just curious in a year, what will we be looking at in 2 years? Because there'll be a request for additional counselors and a prioritization of limited money. So how do you think we should be looking at that, and what will you be able to tell us at the end of a year?
I think that the metrics that we generally look at are fewer behavioral referrals, improved grades, improved attendance. All of those things are generally the outcomes that you see short-term in with social and emotional learning programming, and long-term, you can see increased graduation rates, reduced dropout rates, students just simply being more engaged in school. I think when we have more school climate data to look at, I think we'll see improved school climate. Students feeling safer at school, students feeling like they have an adult in school that they can trust. I think that the benefits are that there are lots and lots of data points that we'll be able to point to in the shorter term.
Thanks, Kathy. Any additional questions, board members? All right. Thank you again. It's really encouraging, and we appreciate all the hard work. We'll move to the next item on our agenda, which is action items, consent grouping, including 10.1, approval of minutes, October 10th, 2017 special meeting, 10.2, approval of minutes, October 10th, 2017 regular meeting, 10.3, approval of minutes, October 17th, 2017 special meeting, 10.4, acceptance of donation, Superior Elementary, 10.5, cancellation of November 28th, 2017 regular board meeting, 10.6, change order to the construction manager general contractor contract for bond-funded improvement work at Douglas Elementary School, 10.7, Infor contract extension. Are there any items board members would like to pull from the consent grouping? Hearing none, I need a motion. Motion from Kathy, second from Tina. Are there any items board members would like to discuss on the consent grouping? Hearing none, Laura, could you please call the vote on the motion to approve the consent grouping?
Belval,
Yes.
Benford, Fuqua,
Yes.
Garcia, Gebhardt,
Yes.
Marquis, Myers.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next item on our agenda is an action item 11.1, Community Montessori Proposal for Focus School Expansion, Montessori Adolescent Program. Need a motion to approve.
What are we being asked to approve?
I think we have to move this before it's discussed as an action item. Is that? Yeah. Great. So I need a motion to approve the recommended action on the Community Montessori Proposal for Focus School Expansion.
So moved.
So moved from Jenny, second. From Tina, discussion. We did discuss this at our previous meeting, and we appreciated the comments on improving the expansion proposal process. I think the board heard that loud and clear. Hearing no further requests for discussion, Laura, could you please call the vote on the motion to approve the recommendation on the Community Montessori proposal?
Belval,
Yes.
Benford, Fuqua,
Yes.
Garcia, Gebhardt, Marquis, Myers.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, the next item on our agenda is a study item, our 2018 BVSD Legislative Platform. Dr. Stevenson, will you help us get started? Or?
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Fuqua, could you repeat that? I was
Sure.
making a
No,
note
I
on
apologize. I
Montessori.
didn't mean to put you on the spot. We're moving to our study item, the BVSD legislative platform for 2018. We did have some discussion
Yes.
at our work session with our lobbyists. Perhaps we can just launch into any board member questions or comments, unless you had anything to add.
Okay, thank you, and I apologize. I was writing down notes, and
Yeah, no worries.
I do apologize. You had talked about this, and what we did was, if you look at the legislative platform, you will see that there's some additions in red that I hope reflect your conversation. And if there are other issues, tell us tonight, and we will bring it back to the next board meeting. Or if you don't have other additions, then we can vote tonight. I'm sorry, you're voting to accept it for study. Thank you.
Board members, any questions or comments based on the revised version that came out of our discussion? Tina?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a general comment about 2.5, which talks about the repeal or consolidation of any local override funding options and opposes the use of local override funds to backfill state funding. I just want to say that I recognize that BVSD is one of the most affluent districts in our state, and it's not, that's not because, personally, that's not for me that I don't want to share, but I don't think that's the right way to get more funding into other districts. So I just want to make it clear that that's not sort of a NIMBY kind of idea, but it's more about finding a way to overall lift everyone up to our level. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Additional comments or questions? Kathy? Oh, Jenny?
I do have a quick question. First of all, thank you for that, Tina. I mean, we really are very lucky in Boulder Valley to have the ability to support, the willingness and the ability to support our schools at the level we do. And the state needs to find a way to do that for all of our school districts. My question would be, in the past, we've had, in addition to our lobbyists, some staff involvement down at the Capitol. For many years, it was Briggs Gamblin, and then Bruce did a lot of that work, or Dr. Messenger did a lot of that work himself during his time as our superintendent. And I wonder, are we going to be relying mostly on our lobbyists in the upcoming year, or are we going to have some staff involvement?
We have both. We certainly have our lobbyists who are engaged. We also have Leslie Stafford and Bill Sutter attend Colorado School Finance, which certainly has influence on the legislature. And I'll turn to Leslie and make sure if there's anything else I should note.
Depending on the topic, we certainly could go down and help testify, and we do. Andrew, I believe, is still working with Case. Is that correct? Yep. And
Yes,
so
thank you.
we will still stay involved and work with Tanya and Ernestine. It's not unusual for them to call us if they need help or one of our legislators needs more information.
Past is send out a regular update to not just the board, but interested people in Boulder Valley, talking about what's going on at the legislature and what our position is, and how to get involved should you wish to, or at least contact information for the legislators. And that,
Okay.
I wonder if that'll continue this year as well.
Let us work with our lobbyists on that.
And we're still planning to have a dinner with them.
Do we have a date?
December 19th.
December
yes.
19th, we are having dinner with our legislators.
Thank you. Other questions or comments on the proposed legislative platform? Shelley?
Just, I think everything in red looks fine. I'm just looking at 3.2, and I'm not sure that's what that originally said. Does that read right to you guys, 3.2? The last clause? Yeah, I think that should say transparent, not transparent. Either, or we lost it.
Yeah, I think you're
Or we
right.
lost a sentence in there or something.
Something, yeah.
I'm not going to advocate for things that are not transparent.
Shelley, do you want to rewrite that and just send it out?
You're
Just take out
saying
the
not
not.
should be removed.
Yeah, take out the not.
I think we should just take the not out for now, and I'll go back and look and see if it, I think there's a whole line missing. that-
It's, yeah, Melissa, do you have any, I don't know who put input on this, but it's kind of, it's confusing the reading, putting that not in front of transparent. Yeah.
We just copied it over from last year, so
Okay.
where a line got drawn.
somewhere
not
something got
transparent
dropped.
last year.
Yeah, I mean, so what we want is any tools to be transparent to students and their parents, and maybe we need to break that sentence apart so it's clearer. That's all. Right, Jelly, is that what you're?
Well, I'm just looking at the clause before that. You know, we're listing things like contains clear parameters for data privacy access, including analytical tools. Those are not tools for access. So I feel like there's a sentence missing in there above. You know what I mean? Those two things don't go together.
Mm-hmm.
So something got dropped along the way. And maybe that not was right when it was when that line was in there, but the not is not right now.
Do any of you remember why you had that line in there? Because I find it a rather confusing line myself.
I don't think it was written that way originally. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Somehow in reproducing this over and over, something's gotten lost, I think.
All
So,
right.
Melissa, would you work on that one? Can you work on that one? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Shelley. So I think,
Before the legislation was passed, I mean, would you want to just drop out 3.2 and leave 3.1 as more of a broad statement?
the proposal was to drop 3.2 and just leave 3.1 in there?
3.1 addresses student privacy.
One point, Melissa, we talked about this, and I don't know why it's not in here, but I think we had changed 3.2 to say something like BVSD supports strict enforcement of legislation, to make that current.
Oh, I know why.
Jenny?
I do remember. I mean, I do remember discussing that, and not that we're opposed to strict enforcement, I don't think, but because this is a legislative platform, so I think we can assume that we support enforcing the laws, and this is just about enacting laws, so it seemed like, even though, I mean, that it just wasn't that the legislative platform wasn't the right place to talk about the enforcement of existing laws.
So we just let legislation stay in there after that discussion? Is that what happened?
I think maybe, as I recall. I do
Okay.
kind of remember that.
I think I would just go back and find what that originally said and fix it. I think that would be best at this point.
We could stop, put a period after the word information in that. I mean, we support legislation that requires stringent technical and administrative safeguards to protect student personally identifiable information, period.
Well, I think the clear parameters for data privacy access was about sharing, and so that was relevant. I mean, that's different from, I mean, it's...
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Although data privacy access is kind of a weird phrase, too.
Yeah, it is, actually.
Well, with that background, Melissa, can you take a stab at it?
Thank you.
And if any board members have any input, share that with Melissa, and then it'll come back. It'll come back on action, I think, with that one potential revision, right? Okay. Thanks, everybody. Final item on our agenda is agenda setting. If board members have any other items not already on our agenda they'd like to raise at this time, Laura and I will capture those. Yes, Kathy, and then Tom.
Are security cameras on our agenda yet? The conversation around security cameras?
We have not calendared that yet, but at our next agenda setting meeting, we will do that.
And then as we talked about, or came up during the Superior meeting, I think we should start thinking about calendaring the tuition-based kindergarten issue.
Okay.
So, are there other things on our calendar that have been waiting there for a long time that we haven't scheduled at this point, or?
There are a few things, yeah. I think at the
we need
last,
to
I don't
schedule
have it in
those
front of
first.
me, but yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And Tom?
Yeah, no, one of the things we had was class sizes on our, the next board meeting will be my last real board meeting of my tenure. I would really like to have an opportunity to talk about class sizes and the research around class sizes. Perhaps we can put it in as an informational item and allow me some time that I can present, my studies on that to the rest of the board, as well as what the administration and Cindy had said a meeting or two ago that you had a lot of information that you would like to pull, and research done in those areas, and so would I. So, that would be really something that I would like to see.
Class size discussion on, I think that's the November 14th meeting?
Yeah, I
is what
believe
you're
that's the
suggesting?
last one, yeah.
Kathy?
Tom, can you give us that ahead of time? your research, and so that we're not trying to read along while you're talking. It'd just be really
Oh,
helpful.
absolutely. What I'd like to do is make it a part of the packet and agenda items.
Board members okay with that, adding that to the 14th?
Depends on what else is on the agenda. I mean, we still, I mean, it seems to me like when we met last, we had pretty full agendas. So that would be my only caveat, is I don't know what else is on the agenda for the 14th. And
Okay, we'll take a look.
Yeah.
And Tom, if you could be in touch with Cindy about that. Any other? All right, hearing none, thank you very much, everybody. We're adjourned.